When should primary school children start receiving sex education? At some schools the answer is never, while others believe it should start in Year 3. At the Shepherd's Special School in Nottingham, sex education is made a priority and begins at nursery. Head teacher David Stewart believes that special schools can teach mainstream schools a lot about this area of the curriculum and is calling on all schools to follow his example. In a Shepherd's School classroom, he was joined by Alison Johnson, a PSHE specialist. Head teacher Paul Heery. Academic Juice van Leeuwen. Sex education pioneer Dilys Went. And Moira Pucky, a head teacher honest enough to admit she's not given much thought to her sex education policy for years. The discussion starts with the head teachers outlining their policies and how they involve parents.
I always talk when the new parent comes, and this is, maybe a three-year-old child, begin to talk about when they're going to be older. Just not alarmingly so, but just say we will need, as time goes on, to talk about these things. And then we run very active parent workshops. Right. And what's been really useful over the years are the parents of the older children coming to talk with the parents of the younger children. So we almost act as facilitators rather than leading it. And they will be saying, if only we had done this earlier. If only we did this and this really worked well.
I think in our mainstream primary school there are some similarities with some of the things you described, David, particularly the fact that sex and relationships education doesn't happen out of context with the rest of the work we do and the rest of the curriculum. And even though it's focused as a discrete series of lessons in Year 6, it builds on work that's done through the PSHE curriculum, through the science curriculum, and a huge amount of work in terms of behaviour and relationships and so on. By approaching it in that way, we've found that we've generally had very good parental support, and we haven't had a great deal of anxieties raised from our parent body.
Your children are very specific children with very specific needs, but on the other hand, I personally probably think I should rethink a little bit more the way we begin to tackle it, because we do exactly as you do. We wait till Year 6. The school nurse and the teacher will deliver these particular lessons. I think they're very good. I've seen them, I get involved myself. We talked to the governors about it. She did the process for the governors, so they were very happy with it. We then invited the parents, and I'm going back a long time now, and it's one of these things that rolls on and on and on. Unless confronted by something like this, you don't actually re-examine it if it's working really well. We do have a particular teacher who is designated as being the support for any girl who starts to menstruate earlier. And in that case, they know exactly who they've got to go to. But we do rely on the parents telling us and making us aware of it. I can't think of any other way that we would find out.
What's prompting the urge to change? I mean, what's the driving force behind that? I wonder.
Well, I mean, personally, I think all children are developing at a much faster rate than they did. I also feel that possibly we could let them down in the fact that we are quite rigid in a changing world. So, and I also feel that you constantly should be rethinking what you're doing educationally. And up until now, I think that the 3 or 4 lessons in Year 6 that we've been giving have been adequate enough, but maybe the time has come to rethink, because we are in a changing world and our children are different.
I think one of the issues that we're very aware of is how far we can go, or how much we can tell the children without upsetting our parents, without offending their culture and their religion. And although we have invited parents, it is that reluctance to discuss the subject and to talk about it. And while the parents did say, yes, it's fine, what you're telling our children is okay, could you just emphasise the role of marriage in this? And we were happy to do that, because that's in the government guidelines, marriage and other stable relationships. We don't know how much further we can take our curriculum until we can have that kind of discussion and that dialogue with our parents. And it's going to take a brave person to start that off, and it's probably going to be me. I would, I'd appreciate. Where do you think I should start on this? What
we found that has really helped us over the years, about 20 years ago we set up what was called the Sex Education Monitoring Group, which sounds a very grand title. But actually what it was a group of parents, governors, teachers, and then a wide range of people from the community. So it might be school nurse, it might be police, someone from the university, seeing that this was a community issue, it wasn't just one school's issue. And getting that sort of advice, if you've got a parent who can be saying, this is what we're going to be doing, can you be part of that working group? And because it's called the monitoring group, that's exactly what it does. So periodically, one or two members will go and see what's being taught in the classes, so that when we have meetings with parents, they can be saying, well, actually, we've been into classes and we've talked with staff and we've had feedback, and this is... And in a sense, that's reassured. So in 20 years, no parent has ever withdrawn their child. It doesn't mean they're always hunky-dory happy about it, but no one's ever withdrawn. Because I think it's about taking them with you.
Children have said to us, sex education is too biological, though speaking as a biologist, I don't think you can be too biological, but too just functional and not enough about relationships. And that's where we can start with very young children, teaching them to talk about emotions.
One question soon begins to dominate the discussion. How should sex education respond to the amount of sexual imagery and information that children are subjected to every day?
We have a very sexualised society. I think we've all, perhaps with some horror if you're as old as me, looked at the sort of explicit sexual material which is coming on television earlier and earlier. And even the trailers for post-9 o'clock programmes are seen by children and raise questions. And if we're honest with children, education is about answering children's questions, but we need to have an environment where they can ask those questions without losing face and without being laughed at and jeered at or bullied by their contemporaries.
You hear young children of 5 singing, I want to have sex on the beach. Now, whether they understand what they're singing, but you see them bopping around, I saw that in Smith's in the children's section, and why are they playing this in the children's section in Smith's? But so they are being exposed to all sorts of language which they may or may not have any understanding about, but they do need to have a context put, because they're being exposed to so much now, aren't they?
And don't you think it's easy to make assumptions because we hear children saying things that maybe they've picked up from the television? It's easy to make assumptions that therefore they have the knowledge to back it up. And in my experience in primary school, actually they don't. No, and actually they don't understand what a lot of this means, and they certainly don't understand it in a context. So we've got to give them that context.
The sexualised society, this continuous kind of bombardment of sexualised images onto young people, we rely on parents. We rely very much on parents to filter that, to mediate that, and in schools we're basically picking up the pieces of the things that may be left over. And I think the intellectual context, the cognitive context, that's very good for schools. That's why I disagree with the idea that there's too much biology. I think that biology is great for that because it provides you with kind of a fact basis that even teenagers can recognise as logical. But I think schools have not as much effect as maybe governments want us to think. And the magical button, let's push another school programme through, doesn't work.
Yeah, but perhaps that by providing that context in school, we can do what you were referring to before. Parents may welcome that. It may give the parents the opportunity who find it difficult because of reasons of upbringing, or there are difficulties in discussing things openly with the children. If children are doing things in school, if they're having lessons in school, maybe that makes that a little bit easier. I mean, I don't see how it
cannot be done otherwise.
Yeah. I think too that to help the parents is very important. I think the system's slightly different in Holland with your television, and I don't think you have tabloid press so much. No. Now that tabloid press around fish and chips is a very, very good education method in this country, and it's something else that parents have to cope with. And as I think many of them have not understood the impact that can have on the wrong thinking of children. And I did say, by the way, that you can't have too much biology and English. So I believe in that too. But I also now believe, as a biologist, that we need to extend it into relationships at the same time as you talk about the actual facts. And sometimes the school provides the teachers are the only trustworthy person that youngster can actually approach.
I'm not happy about that at all. I think we should be very careful how we deal with especially explicitly sexual issues with young people, because as you say, they're being bombarded by it. We have to be extremely careful, because it may very well result into that we sort of validate what's going on outside, that we say, yeah, it's all right for a 9-year-old to be thinking about sex, it's all right to be talking about vibrators and things like that. And I think we should be extremely cautious, because we may actually be going down a very slippery slope, that we're actually trying to catch up with the culture, and the culture is setting the norms for us. And rather than, if you like, the educational and I think moral establishment of parenting and schools setting the norms, it's, if you like, television setting the norms for what we should be discussing. So I think we should be extremely cautious to not remember that they may be menstruating at 9 years old, but psychologically, mentally, they're just as an infant as 20 years ago.
Because there is a danger of it all racing ahead of us and whatever, and actually students and children can be very confused and actually trying to say, you know,
you don't
actually,
have to. It isn't the norm.
It isn't
you really
the norm.
Don't have to.
You know,
that's not what usually happens. No. That is what.
And I think the worry is sometimes if we don't, though, do some education, if children think that is the norm, and we know sadly that sometimes things are happening to children, and if they've no other context, they think that is the norm. So there is some point that actually you do need to be setting because there are some children who very sadly are abused and whatever, and they think, because if there's no education, they think that's what happens to children.
There's time to raise one more concern: the teacher taking the sex education class.
Very often you might have situations where teachers don't feel confident, that there isn't a great deal of training that teachers have before about teaching sex and relationships education, and there may be some of those issues that you might have amongst the parent body may also exist amongst your teachers, and so not all teachers will feel equally as confident and equally as comfortable. But then we also have to think about the messages that we give if teachers withdraw and let someone else come in and to deliver that instead of the regular class teacher.
This is the key thing, isn't it? I mean, the idea that this is, the parents have an important role in that, is that they, under normal circumstances, have an intimate relationship with their child. They should be able to convey those messages, but also because of that intimacy with their child, it's sort of meaningful. Whereas for teachers, you have a professional relationship that will always, and you have maybe you have your own children, and as soon as you find it, okay, I'm saying this to this child because it's my professional duty to do that, but actually I would say it differently to my child. There's something slightly odd going on.
I think that was how we described what we do at an infant level, certainly, that it was about the rights and wrongs and rights of children have over their own bodies, and respect for each other, and respect and the different relationships that they have, and that you're not the same with your parents as you are with your teacher, as you are with your friend, as you are with your next door neighbour.
For Moira Puckey, the discussion has served as an important reminder that despite the difficulties, mainstream schools can learn from special schools in taking more interest in the whole child.
I shall go back to my school and think, can I do things differently? But I am reasonably satisfied with what is going in at the moment, and I shan't shake it around too much. But listening to other people, you do start to rethink your views, don't you? And I thank you for what you said. And I mean, with David, I am in awe of the fact that because you've got special children, you have to treat them very much in a special way. And we take our mainstream children very much for granted sometimes.